One of the challenges we had in Pakistan, after the tsunami in 2004, the international community came together and recognised the humanitarian response to the tsunami was less than perfect. There's a very nice way of putting it. And created a process called the Humanitarian Response Review to say, how do we restructure the international response to natural disasters and conflict? And they created a theory called the cluster approach, which was divide everything into clusters: health, education, logistics, etc., about 9 or 10 clusters. And the way the international humanitarian community works is there is a thing called the IASC, the Interagency Standing Committee. And the people who pulled together the cluster approach were recommending this new model to the IASC principals, that is the heads of all the agencies, for their approval at the December meeting. So August 2005, they created the proposal to be approved in December 2005. The problem is the Pakistan earthquake happened in October 2005. So when we deployed, we had a question. Do we operate the natural disaster in the way that we all knew was discredited because we'd just been through the humanitarian response review process, but was still technically authorised? Or do we try and implement this new cluster approach, which hadn't yet been authorised, but in theory would be better, but no one had ever tried it before? What do you do? And I sat down with General Nadeem very early on in the operation, and it was the day before the Federal Relief Commission, which was the Pakistan agency set up to run the earthquake relief, was going to announce their national plan. So this would have been October 10 or 15, somewhere around about that. And General Farouk, who was another general, and General Nadeem laid out what they were going to do, and a few of us looked at this structure and said, we don't see that as working. You know, there was this very complex interface between the military and civilian structures of the Pakistan government, and it just looked messy. And they said, what are you going to do? And we said, well, we don't really know. Here's our problem. This is how we used to do it. Then we had the humanitarian response review, and then they've created this thing called clusters. And he said, explain clusters to me. And literally I drew it on the back of the envelope, not a metaphorical envelope, a real envelope. And I drew the 10 clusters and said, well, this is how the theory says that we should do it. And he looked at it and he said, if we set that structure up, you're not imposing that on us, are you? I said, no, I can't. We don't have the authority. He said, we could kind of do that as a joint experiment, couldn't we? I said, yeah, we could. So it's not undermining our national sovereignty, but you're not stepping outside of your authority because it's not you saying to do that you're going to do it. It's me saying the government of Pakistan's going to do it. And I'm like, yeah, that'll work. That'll work. And we developed this partnership where when he was having a difficulty getting something through the government of Pakistan, I'd write him a letter, say, please do this. And he would go to the government of Pakistan and say, oh, look, the UN says we have to do this. And when I was having a problem getting something through the UN, I'd say, hey, sir, I need a hand. So he'd write me a letter instructing me to do this, and I'd like, oh, look what the army said we need to do. So what we'd managed to do was create a partnership where we really did help each other out in the weaknesses. So when I drew down the cluster approach, and Nadeem said, listen, we need to adopt that. And he gave the direction that the Pakistan response would then morph into the cluster approach. What we then saw develop was incredible.